All right. So this week, the training that I have prepared is the training going over hazardous materials, how to safely handle them, dispose of them, where you can dispose of them, and a little bit of just like information when it comes to these hazardous materials. Um, the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, it's an independent executive um, agency of the US federal government that is tasked with environmental protection matters, specifically on the health and well-being of people and the planet. So they are the ones that typically come up with the rules and regulations for what makes a hazardous material hazardous, and then how to dispose of them, where we can dispose of them, different things like that. So the EPA, again, is the one that really handles a lot with the hazardous materials. And before I get into really the main part of this training, something that we need to remember is that some of these trainings, they are more just for your information so that as you go into these daycare centers, you're aware of what the rules and regulations are, because that is part of our job description. But it is not something that we actively need to be concerned about. It is the provider's job to be making sure that these rules and regulations are being followed. But it is something that if you have a question or concern, you're noticing that something kind of seems off or not quite right with the way that they're handling some of these rules and regulations, whether it's hazardous materials or any of the other trainings that we've gone over, you're aware of it and you're able to kind of bring that up, whether that's with us or with the daycare themselves. But that is why we go over these trainings. The main point is, again, just to have that knowledge so that we can be making sure that we are in a safe environment and that the environment that the kids are in is safe as well. So there's 4 different conditions that would make a hazardous waste hazardous. So the EPA, they consider some household materials as hazardous when they meet one or more of one of these 4 conditions. Household materials, later on, they will be considered household hazardous waste. So the HHW is how I kind of have done that in further slides. But basically anything that makes a product in your home hazardous is if it is depends on the ignitability of it, meaning that the waste can easily catch fire, and things are considered flammable or have a high ignitability when the flash point or ignition point is less than 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So anything that could catch on fire, whether by itself or through something else, if it's less than 140 degrees Fahrenheit, that is considered hazardous waste, or just a hazardous material. The second condition is if it's corrosive, and that basically is a waste or material that is capable of corroding metal containers. So this is typically an acid or base that has the ability to, again, eat through a metal container. The third one is if it's reactive. So this is when a waste is unstable under normal conditions. These materials and waste can cause explosions, toxic fumes, gases or vapors when heated, or again, just under normal conditions. They produce these toxic environment problems. The last one is just the toxicity of something. So this is waste when it's potentially fatal or harmful when absorbed or ingested. So these materials can pollute groundwater if not disposed of properly, and that will come into play when we talk about how to dispose of them. How it can pollute this groundwater. So these are, again, the 4 conditions If a waste or material meets any one of these four or more than one of these, it is considered a household hazardous waste. So these are all examples of household waste. Something to know with these when we talk about household hazards, it doesn't mean that you can't use them in the daycares. It just means that these are things that you need to be making sure that you're handling properly and you're disposing of properly. And some things it will require you not to handle them while kids are around, but you can still use it like after daycare hours, different things like that. So again, all of these are examples, things like fuels, pesticides, yard care chemicals, many cleaning supplies are considered hazardous. Batteries, cooking oil, automotive fluids and products, aerosols, fluorescent light bulbs, any devices that contain mercury, your televisions or your monitors, kind of along that same vein, your computers, and then your cell phones and paint. Again, all of these are considered hazardous materials and waste if they are not used properly and disposed of properly, but some of them are still safe to have in these daycares, again, as long as we are using them correctly. So avoiding risk with these household hazardous waste items, you need to be monitoring the usage of them. So again, going back to what I just said in the previous slide, like they're safe if you're monitoring how you use them, how you store them, and then how you dispose them. Improper disposal can include pouring the materials down the drain, on the ground, into a storm sewer, or in some cases, just putting them into your regular trash can, your garbage inside your house. The best way to make sure that you're monitoring that you're using the correct usage, storage, and disposal of products is by reading the labels on them. And that is something that we will talk about in the next slide. So safe storage of these items means that these items are inaccessible to children. They are stored in their original containers, so you're not moving them between containers. They have to be labeled with what it is. And then you need to follow the instructions for the storage on the label, meaning if it says to keep it between certain degrees Fahrenheit, you're keeping it between those degrees. If it says to keep it out of direct sunlight, you're not putting it in direct sunlight. If it says that you need to refrigerate it after you open it, making sure that you put it in the fridge, all of those things, making sure that you're storing it safely, those will come from the label. And the label and the instructions that come from the label is one of the biggest reasons why you're supposed to keep them in the original containers. It also is then just already labeled for what it is, what is contained inside, like what chemicals are there, different things like that. So again, just making sure that we are safely storing and we're keeping them in the original containers with the labels on them is best. And then just remember that corroding containers require special handling. So you need to call the local hazardous materials office, health department, or fire department for instructions of how to handle those. If it's starting to corrode, you should not handle it by yourself without explicit permission, basically, from one of those three options listed. So going into the safe disposal of products, the biggest thing that they talk about when you go to dispose is don't mix the products together. So just because you have some, like two different cleaners that are taking up two different containers, you're not supposed to mix those two cleaners to dispose of them. One reason why is because incompatible products, when mixed together, they might react, so they could ignite or explode. And then contaminated products might become unrecyclable, so it makes it hard to actually dispose of them properly because you've mixed them and made them unrecyclable. When it comes to disposal, the best thing to do is to check with your local environmental, health, or solid waste agency for information on the household hazardous waste management options in your specific area. I do have listed in one of these slides the county for Utah County and Salt Lake County, the websites that you can go to that are specifically the Household Hazardous Materials website, and the locations for them. I don't have the locations listed, but you can find the locations through the website. So another thing to know when it comes to disposing is empty containers can still contain hazardous waste and are still considered dangerous because of residual chemicals that might remain. So even though it might seem like your Windex bottle is completely empty, it could still contain some of those dangerous chemicals. So it is still considered a household hazardous waste, and you need to be making sure that you're disposing of it safely. And then again, just a reminder, handle them with the same care you do with full containers, and continue to follow the label instructions for storing the container. So just because it's empty doesn't mean that you can all of a sudden put it in direct sunlight, because again, there might still be residual chemicals left, and they can still react even though the bottle is not full. And then always keep storing the containers, whether it's full or empty, until proper disposal is possible. So don't put them in a pile out on your front porch, even after you've called to have them removed or whatever, or you've called to make an appointment to take them to someplace. Leave them in the proper storage places until you are able to physically actually take them with you right at that time to dispose of them. If you have questions about safe disposal of or care of the household hazardous wastes, you can contact your county health departments or visit their websites. And again, these are the resources and the websites specifically for Utah County. There's a south one, which is like Provo and south, and then a north point, which is again that like more Orem and north for Utah County. And then in Salt Lake County, they have two different ones as well. These ones I don't think are area specific, but you can always go to their websites and make sure, check that out. And then something else to know is that fees, there are fees depending on the county and waste management location. Fees are listed on the websites typically, so you know before you go. And then while some waste is free to dump, others will have a small fee. So it's not like just because it says that one or two of the things is free doesn't mean that everything that you're taking is free. And then if you have a bigger load, always make sure that you check to see if they require an appointment. Some locations do require that you have an appointment made for a bigger load. So that is everything that I have when it comes to waste, household waste hazards, how to store them. Really, again, it's nothing really specific that I can give because it's something that you need to read the labels for. So just remember to read the labels, make sure you're following the instructions on the labels, and then keep them in their original containers, keep them out of reach of children. And then just remember as well that just because it is considered a hazardous waste doesn't mean that it is always dangerous to use around kids. So things such as your aerosols, you can spray them as long as you're not spraying a ton or directly around the kids, that's typically okay. Whereas some of your lawn care things, they typically say that no human can be on the lawn for 24 hours. You need to be making sure that you're following those instructions and directions as well. So yeah, that is what I have for this week. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. and I will answer the questions if I have answers.